Divine Justice Ministry, lawyer, professor, and minister, the Reverend Anthony Suarez, as your host. The crossroads between law, the Constitution, and religion, where the First Amendment is always the first topic of discussion. Hello, Reverend Tony Suarez. That's me. And with me is Steve Alcino, my host of this show, plus Raw Talk and the Bar Association Conversations of the Moot Court Conversation. We have 3 shows, and Steve is my co-host on all 3 shows. So those of you who are interested, you know that you could find us on the respective Facebooks, my Facebook, Steve's Facebook, the Divine Justice Facebook. We also have YouTube available. So all of this is available to you. You should be interested on the topic. So welcome and thank you for taking the time to listen to us, as this is what I'm hoping that this video, as all our videos, will be educative to you, to learn something. We're not here to blast anybody or embarrass anybody, but certainly we want to educate. I am a minister, but I'm also a professor, and I want to know that that's what I'm trying to do with you. And so today we have an interesting topic, and I suggest, because this is a brand new area that where people are listening perhaps for the first time, let's explain, Steve, what is the Divine Justice Ministry? And so let's start off with that. I am, as you saw in the intro, both a minister, a lawyer, a law professor, and a former politician. In that capacity, I've seen a lot of people turn upside down over the question of what are my rights when it comes to the First Amendment, my right to have practice my religion my way, or your right to impose religion or moral values on everyone else. This is a very big topic. There's lots of case law on this. And so what I want to do is always do this. I want to make sure that you understand that what we're discussing, and every case that we will be discussing from now on to in perpetuity, will be what the Supreme Court says is the First Amendment. You may not agree with what the Supreme Court says, but and you have the right to your opinion. But what we're going to discuss is how the law is crossroads with your First Amendment right. You have the right to believe. So I'll give you a quick example before we get into the specific case that I want to discuss about today. Let's assume you celebrate the Sabbath on Sunday, and you don't want businesses to open. We all agree, let's close Sunday businesses, observe the Sabbath. And so we write a law. Business will be closed on Sundays so people can attend church, right? That problem is that you're not the only one that observes the Sabbath. There are religions that observe the Sabbath on a Saturday. And so as a result of that, lawsuits were brought many years ago to stop the imposition of a Sabbath observance on Sunday, because the people who observed the Sabbath on Saturday felt that that was an imposing of religious value on them. That's an example. Today we have a series of cases where the Supreme Court rules, and the way this works, for those of you who know, there are 9 men and women that sit on the Supreme Court. Depending on the majority, whether it's 5 or more, decide what the law is. So legislators write the law, they use words, they use language. But the problem is that you have to take that word and then apply it to a case that is actually what's called a case in controversy. So you take the law that was written by the legislature, whether it's a state legislature or it's a federal legislature, the Congress, right? And you take those language and you apply it to a situation, and then you will see, wow, this violates the Constitution, First Amendment, or it does not violate the Constitution in the First Amendment. So what our the mission is, and my mission particularly, but of course Steve has decided to join me in this journey, okay, in trying to explain to everyone else what this means. Now, as a law professor, I do this with law students, but they're already well prepared. They're already studying the law. I'm trying to reach the people who are not lawyers, try people who are not really understanding what's going on, because then they get pissed off. Yes, Steve.
No, I'm not a lawyer.
Okay. And that's why I think this is going to work really well, because when I get off the down into the forest and get too deep in the forest. Your job is to bring me out and say, "Whoa,
I gotta bring you back.
what's going on here?" All right.
Yeah.
So this, but I want everyone to understand who's listening to me, and nor to misunderstand me. I may be a minister, but that doesn't mean that I propagate one point of view. There are many points of view. My personal point of view, there are many paths to God. One God, many paths. And I do believe in God. Now, some people don't believe in God at all. And they, oh, that's a point of view. It is. Agreed. I have a point of view. All right. And you have a right to your point of view. And I have a right to my point of view. And that's where the Supreme Court has to do that balancing. When we start writing laws, is the law balanced, or does it favor one religion versus the other? That is the ultimate question that is determined by the First Amendment, and that's what we're going to be discussing in the next couple of shows from now on. So, Steve, that's the backdrop. Why I'm doing this, because of my background, and I find that in the religious question, every year whether it's abortion or gay rights or gay pride or genes normal, the type of medication you take, all of this seems to have a religious implication, and politicians always want to mix religion into the law so they can get votes. But the problem with that, they get the votes, but then they create a problem for someone who doesn't want that particular law, right? So that clash is always and will always be, so long as religion is being used by politicians in order to get votes. And so I think that
I
that's
call
the interesting thing.
I call it manipulation.
Well, it is manipulation, and the politicians are really good at that, right? I
Oh
get
yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
because I'm this or that. So right now, for example, on the national stage, you can go. You have our president, excuse me, the Secretary of Defense. He likes to call himself the Secretary of War. Has decided that he doesn't want transgender people in the military because he thinks that's against his image of what it looks like. So the question is, can he use his power as the Secretary of Defense by issuing regulations to make it difficult or impossible for people who identify themselves as transgender to be in the military? That's a question, right? And that is one of those many, many things. So is he manipulating? Clearly, he's manipulating because he has a base that he's playing to, and he doesn't care that the other people, they're small in numbers. They don't really count that much. So therefore, I can use my base in order to make myself more popular by oppressing a minority group. So
I
now,
don't.
so we have all that kind of stuff of manipulation, and you can say, is it fair? Is it right? Isn't this a country where the majority rules? Isn't the majority supposed to be able to vote for laws? The answer to that question is that yes, that is true, but our Constitution was written to protect the rights of the minorities, so that we do not have a tyranny of the majority. And so when you have these balances, we have to determine where we're going with this stuff. Interesting.
You have used a word there that sounded real tyranny.
Mhm.
Tyranny. Tyranny of power, basically. Where what you described just now, listen, I got mixed feelings when it comes to this. You know that. Um, but in that same token, I know how to respect individuals. I also know not to judge individuals. If you feel that, you were born Mary and now you want to be Ramon,
Right.
You know, that's your choice. Choices have consequences, and that applies to anything that we do.
Right.
Um, but should a person be isolated, treated bad, disrespected, made to feel less than because of political religion or the way he or she carries himself based on what they believe is who they are?
Hmm.
No, I don't think it's right. I don't think it's fair.
I think both
Um,
you and I would agree on something like that, a statement like that. The problem is that's a general statement. What happens with cases is it becomes a specific incident, and that's how we're going to analyze this from now on. We're not going to say general. Oh yeah, I think we respect everybody. Everybody says that, but the question is, would you agree to a particular law, which then very specifically says something, and then we have to look to see how you believe about that. Okay, that's that's the point, Steve. That is exactly the point. We have everybody says we agree, let's be good to each other, love each other, but then I will say, by the way, you can't have a circumcision because that's cruelty to a person. Oh, wait a minute, circumcision is my religious belief. Oh no, that can be your belief or belief, but that's disgusting. It is, it's a inhumane. It's a torture of the baby. So I'm going to support making illegal to have circumcision. This is an example I'm throwing at you
I
as
understand.
specific examples of how tolerance and intolerance then gets to the point where you have to make a decision. Someone has to make a decision, and that's the job of the Supreme Court. Now, you brought up several times in our discussion off the record, oh, isn't the law the law? And then how do these, you know, how could the judges make this different determination? And I like to spend some time, mind you, in law school, we spend a whole lot of time on this issue. We're going to spend just a couple of minutes on this, trying to explain. The law is just words, right? The legislators get together. You've seen pictures on television. They get together. They say, "Let's write this law." They use words, but in the use of the words and the commas that they use, in the pauses that they write, makes a difference how you interpret that law. And thus, depending on your judicial philosophy, you can say, well, the lawmakers or founders, right? The lawmakers meant this. And some people will say, no, they meant that. And I said, whoa, how can this be? So, so that's the tough part because most people do not understand that. You cannot say the law is the law because the law is whatever five people in the Supreme Court says is the law, based on the interpretation of it.
Exactly. That's what I was just took the words right out of my mouth. It goes into interpretation. So then, where does the law count? Where does the judgment goes? Based on interpretation. Well, how about if I'm a crooked judge?
Right.
Okay, and I want to interpret it the way I think because I'm already crooked.
Right.
Okay, and I talk to this other judge. Okay, and then I get him to come along with me.
Right.
You know, okay, I want people to understand. Judges and lawyers and state attorneys, they get together and they have their dinners and they have their drinks and they sit down and they talk about law and they decide, okay, so what are we going to do with this guy? Are we going to plead him out or is he going to do the time? Let me just stick for my guy. I want him to, let's work something out. I understand he did this or she did that. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But when it comes to laws that are going to affect a nation, and every citizen of this nation, specific, because we're talking about the Supreme Court, America, we're talking about us.
Right.
I believe that interpretation is good if it's guided by the law to come to a just conclusion completely based on the law. completely based on the Constitution, not the way I want to interpret it at that moment because of that case.
All right, so let me introduce this. I have a clip that I want to play. It's a clip that, from West Wing, a TV show from many years ago, but it was an excellent clip that shows how a judge reaches his decision how to make a decision. Okay, the way it happens in this particular scene, the president of the United States, which is played by an actor, who is interviewing someone who potentially could be a Supreme Court justice for a vacancy in the Supreme Court, right? And he has the government lawyer sitting there. Rob Lowe happens to be that. Rob Lowe is the government lawyer interviewing the potential Supreme Court justice about his philosophy, his thinking about certain issues. And the president has to make a decision. Am I going to nominate this guy to be the Supreme Court justice? I want to play it. Listen to this. And at the other end, you and I will discuss. And please take notes if you think you lost something here, because I can't stop it in the middle. I'll just play it and let's see how it goes.
All righty.
Are bound to interpret the Constitution within the strict parameters of the text itself. The Constitution doesn't provide for a right of privacy. The right doesn't exist.
The Third Amendment says soldiers can't be quartered in private homes. The Fifth provides protection against self-incrimination, and the Fourth against unreasonable searches. Do you deny the right to privacy lives in those passages?
No, I do not deny it. But the fact that the framers enumerated those specific protections is all the more reason to believe that they had no intention of making privacy a de facto right.
They just fought a revolution. They had no question of their freedoms. The Bill of Rights was meant to codify the most crucial of those rights, not to limit the others.
I do this for a living, Mr. Seaborn.
So do I, Your Honor.
Peyton, do I have the right to put on an ugly plaid jacket and a loud polka dot tie and walk down Main Street?
Yes.
And where in the Constitution is that right guaranteed?
First Amendment, freedom of expression.
What about the use of cream in my coffee? Surely there can be no free speech argument to be made there.
No.
So you would have no objection to the state of New Hampshire passing a law banning the use of cream in coffee?
I would have strong objection, Mr. President, as I like cream as well, but I would have no constitutional basis to strike down the law when you brought your case to the Supreme Court.
As I lose the votes of coffee drinkers everywhere.
1887, there was a sizable block of delegates who were initially opposed to the Bill of Rights. This is what a member of the Georgia delegation had to say by way of opposition. If we list a set of rights, some fools in the future are going to claim that people are entitled only to those rights enumerated and no others. So the framers knew.
Were you just calling me a fool, Mr. Seaborn?
I wasn't calling you a fool, sir. The brand new state of Georgia was.
Gentlemen, laws must emanate from the Constitution.
There are natural laws, Judge.
I do not deny there are natural laws, Mr. Ziegler. I only deny that judges are empowered to enforce them.
Then who will?
That's not up to me. And this sideshow is over. With all due respect, Mr. President, I find this kind of questioning very rude.
Well, then, you're really going to enjoy meeting the U.S. Senate.
Be that as it may, it's disgusting. We all know you need me as much as I need you. I read the same polling information you do. 7 to 10 point bump, 90 votes, unanimous out of committee. I was courted. Now you have me taken to school by some kid.
That Sam is young drives me nuts, too, but he took you out for a ride, sir, because that's what I told him to do.
I am an extremely well-credentialed man, Mr. President. And I am unaccustomed to this sort of questioning.
I understand, Peyton. Could you give us a little time, please? We'll make you comfortable while you're waiting.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Put him on a bus.
That's a guaranteed confirmation we're sending out the door based on a 30-year-old piece of paper, which, by the way, no one will ever know about but us.
You don't think the guy that called Sam would know how to call a senator's office.
Mr. President, if this is really about abortion, he already told
It's not
us.
just about abortion. It's about the next 20 years. 20s and 30s, it was the role of government. 50s and 60s, it was civil rights. The next 2 decades are going to be privacy. I'm talking about the internet. I'm talking about cell phones. I'm talking about health records and who's gay and who's not. And moreover, in a country born on the will to be free, what could be more fundamental than this? Toby.
Let's meet Mendoza.
All right.
Very, very interesting. That show was way ahead of the game, huh? Way ahead of the game. Wow, that was pretty cool.
Right? Did you, after watching that, did you get a better understanding of how judges interpret and how someone else could interpret it differently?
And it's just like, the situation with you and me. You are guided to the law, but because you're a lawyer, you're a reverend, and I'm looking at things from a different point of view. But I see what you're trying to convey, okay, and I respect it. And amazing how they kind of predict stuff without, because really, that was a good clip. Way ahead of the game back then, because
Right.
West Wing was, I remember, I never saw much of it because I've never been too much of a TV guy. But yeah, pretty impressive. So Tony, let me ask you, okay? So now that I'm a little bit more open to what I'm learning, which basically boils down to there is a constitution, there is a law, but it adapts to the case per case basis.
Right. That's correct.
And that it's not that it's new, but it is kind of, because now I can understand and things that are happening today in our day and age, why courts are reacting and doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And how it's interpreted based on what you started the show with, which is the 5-4.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm really glad that clip helped you understand the process, because what I want to do now, Steve, is now go into an actual case. All right. In that particular case, they were talking, and the one in the clip, they were talking about the right to privacy. And you saw the judge says the right to privacy is nowhere in the Constitution. It doesn't say you have the right to privacy. It doesn't say that. There's nowhere in the Constitution that says that. But as a lawyer, the lawyer was pointing out, wait a minute, what about, don't you have the right to the search and seizure and in there right now, not to have the troops in my house? Doesn't that imply?
Yep.
Is that an implied right of privacy? And if you do that, then a right of privacy exists. A right of privacy will depend on the woman's right to have an abortion. If she has a right to privacy, then she has a right to control her body. If she has no right to privacy, the government can intercede in her problem, right? So that is the tug and tug. So the judge was saying there is no right to privacy. It's not in the book. I'm a strict constructionist. I read the book strictly. I'm a conservative. There's no right to privacy. The progressive says, wait a minute, there's an implied right to privacy, and based on that implied right. And then the judge comes back, well, if you start doing implied rights, there'll be an implied right for this, and an implied right for that, and an implied right for this. And therefore, we will expand it beyond the original intent. And therefore, it should only be what it specifically says in the Constitution or statute. And then the progressive lawyer says, you can't say that, because when they founded the Constitution, they specifically were afraid that if you just listed them, there were people who were against the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. They were against it because they didn't want a specific list. Say, wait a minute, it's only a list. So anyway, we'll get into the 10th Amendment, and then we'll talk about that in the future. Go ahead.
And and let me see if I get this right. And they did that on purpose, just in case if they found themselves in that situation, they could utilize the loophole to be able to address their
To
case.
address their concerns. Exactly. So the laws are written that way. Okay. So now, see, that had to do with abortion, but the same thing has to do now with the First Amendment. Okay, the First Amendment, freedom of expression. This is what we're in the First Amendment. It says the government, right? The government may not write any law, may not write any law that establishes a religion, nor may it prohibit the free exercise of your religion. Right? So that's what the law says. Cannot establish a religion and cannot infringe on your freedom to exercise your religion. That's from the general language. What is establishment? What is establishment? They say, oh, we're going to establish, we're going to create the Holy Church of Tony Suarez. Is that what we're talking about? Is that establishment? Or establishment of religion mean something like I spoke about earlier that speaks to the Sabbath, right? If I say the Sabbath is on Sunday, am I establishing religion? Some courts say yes, it is. Others say no. So it depends on how you interpret that. So let's look a very specific example of this question. Okay, they went again. Once again, I say this is the Supreme Court, not Tony Suarez or Steve. This is what the Supreme Court was dealing with. And by the way, most of the time when we have these issues, we'll be talking about Supreme Court decisions. Okay. Okay. So what happened? A particular case that I wanna bring up. I'm gonna add this to the stage. Here we go. Feel Good to Be Yourself, a book about gender identity. In the state of Maryland, the school board passed a regulation, just like a law, right? But it's a school board, so they call it a regulation. They passed a regulation that required all teachers to have a curriculum that all children must attend and listen to that was promoting um, uh, acceptance, uh, acceptance of other people and tolerance of other people, right?
Okay.
And so, in order to do that, because they know that there's lots of prejudice against people who are gay, people who are transgender, and there are a lot of children in the school system that feel this way, and they get bullied. They get bullied by the other children because they're gay, and or because their mother and father are really father and father or mother and mother, and so they don't have the normal family, so they get bullied and they get made afraid of. So to stop the bullying, Maryland decided to write a program that would encourage tolerance, encourage diversity, and allow people to listen to and respect other people. So all these a series of books were required reading in a Maryland school. And the books talk about gender identity. It identifies a young child that has two fathers, and they celebrate their anniversary, and they invite everybody to the community to celebrate the anniversary of the wedding anniversary of the two fathers. There's another story about a child that wants to be a boy. She's a girl. She wants to be a boy, and her brother says to her, "You can't be a boy. You're a girl." But it says, "I want to be a girl. I want to be a boy." And the mother says to him, "I love you. Will support you and do whatever you can to make you feel comfortable." So those are the four stories in the book. Different had to do with transgender and a feeling of gender and transsexuals. Now, this was a required curriculum to encourage tolerance and cooperation among the people in people in Maryland. Now, what happens? Some conservative Christians, Muslims, and Jews who believe that that is not the Bible, that this is against God's law, that you are teaching a religious point of view that's different than my religious point of view, and you're affecting my children who are listening to this stuff, and I don't want them to listen to that. Okay? So now that case goes up. They sued in court. It goes all the way up in different variables. They're going to get to the Supreme Court decision. The Supreme Court had to establish or determine whether or not the Maryland school board decision to force everyone to listen to these conversations about tolerance and acceptance, whether or not that was a violation of the rights, of religious rights of the parents who brought the lawsuit, or was the government within its rights to try to create peace and tolerance within the community in general, right? And by not allowing bullying to be an accepted behavior. That was brought before the Supreme Court. All right, so now with that question posed, Steve, let's have your opinion as to where to go.
Well, wow. Okay. So listen, it's a lot of information when it comes to this, because like you say, you're looking at it from a law point of view, and everybody has a right, like everybody has an opinion. I'm not saying that there's individuals out there that don't feel different than others for whatever reason.
Uh-huh.
And we still haven't figured it out. It could be chemical, it could be, I don't know. It could be so many things, and we'll get into that, I guess, at some point. I personally have different thinking when it comes to this, because you and I and many of our listeners are from a different generation. Not that these things did not exist. They did, but they were looked at it in a different way. Not that the way they were looked at it was right. No, it wasn't. It was worse than what it is now. Even though you still get that bully, you still get that individual who thinks that they can treat you wrong because you might be or look different. The thing with two parents of the same gender raising a child is this generation. That is happening now. I don't know for how long. I would have to do some research on that. But God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to get personal. I don't want to get personal or hurt anybody's feelings. Okay? I think that the nucleus and of the child is at home. That's where they grow. That's where they become who they become. It's the base. The first 5 years are crucial in a child's life. That's the base. That's what defines that individual.
Right.
Also, life, situations that happen, things that happen. And I understand. And some things are not, they're not kosher, let's put it that way. It's not fair. It's not just. And unfortunately, there's many cases out there with so many different reasons as to why I am this way, or as to why I behave this way, or why I act this way, or as to why I feel like I do. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, so let me ask you this question, because we have, this decision came out 5-4. I indicated to you off record, right?
Yeah.
And this was a 5-4 decision. Five justices felt that it was improper for the Maryland School Board to force children to listen to a message that the parents did not want them to listen to.
And I
Four,
agree.
four justices said this is the proper role of government to teach tolerance, because in general society there has to be tolerance and not prejudice toward one or the other. And they said, and those judges, they're not stopping those parents from teaching their children whatever they want to teach. You can teach your children to be to only believe in Steve, and not in Adam and Eve, but or Adam and Steve. You can teach your children that. But in the public school, you have to understand that other people. There are people of different race, different cultures, different acceptances, and therefore you have to in public not make fun of those people, because they have their right, and as you have your right. So nothing in the Maryland statute or Maryland law stops you from teaching your children whatever you want to teach. All it does is in the public school there's going to be a condition of tolerance to create public good. That's the argument on one side, right? But those people lost. Those four justices came out that way. Five justices says no, you cannot force them. You can have voluntary, students can go voluntarily there. They can sign up, but you can also have parents say, I do not want my children to listen to this. And so therefore they have what's called an opt-out. So Supreme Court ruled that this decision by the Maryland School Board prohibited the free exercise of the religion of the plaintiffs, in this case the Christians and the Jews and the conservative Jews, Muslims, and therefore struck down and said that was unconstitutional, that statute and that regulation, and then forced the Maryland to go back and do it with an opt-out. People can opt out so their kids don't have to listen to that. That's how the Supreme Court decided this case, looking at the facts as applied to the question of the First Amendment, establishment of religion, and the free exercise and prohibited free exercise thereof. So in that balance, the Supreme Court said, you've infringed on the rights of the conservatives who don't want to hear to the kids, as opposed to other ones felt it was not. So that's how the decision was made.
And in that way, interpreting it that way, it makes sense. I cannot obligate you to do something you don't want to do unless you want to do it.
Right. And you have the freedom to, if you want to be, if I say, look, people who are born left-handed, if I want to have a prejudice against left-handed people, no, people from left-handed, that's the devil. That's a sign of the devil. I will not associate myself with people who are left-handed, right? There was a time it was considered that way. Something was wrong, right?
Yeah.
So I have the right. I have the absolute right to say I don't want to talk to Steve because he's left-handed. But do I have the right to say people who are left-handed have to go to a separate classroom because I don't want my children in the same room with left-handed people?
Why? Because we turn it
to cause that kind of a law.
Why? Because we turn the book sideways and we write funky? Listen, my aunt, and I'm going to piggyback on that. My aunt was born left-handed, but they made her a right-handed, just because of what you said. She lived through that. Right. But you can tell, okay, when a person is left-handed because the mannerisms are there. Even though she writes right-handed, you can still see that mannerism of lefty. But yeah, they changed her. They changed her because in those days, at that time, yeah, You are left-handed. You come from the devil, and yeah, and that's just we were so retro, okay? We were so retro, and it's like, wow, really? Are we? I'm
I
sorry.
think
Continue, my
this
friend.
is our first show actually getting into the detail of how I was thinking I'd like to do the Divine Justice podcast. I like your comment as to the style. We haven't practiced this. We're coming off. We're doing this, and so this our first really show that we've got into the detail. Give me your comment.
And we want to apologize. This is a recording. We didn't go live today
Right.
because we were having some home technical problems. So
Right.
we decided at the last moment, since we already were past the time, to go ahead and record it. We will post it, but we want you to know that we will read those comments and we will go live with these subjects in the 3 different shows to be able to give you the opportunity to debate. If you want to say something to Tony, if you want to say something to me, if you want to put your 2 cents, that's the whole concept and idea of everything. And we do appreciate that because it lets us know that we're being heard and that maybe something that you were able to appreciate and learn like I have since we started doing these different things, and you learn every day. So, yeah, go ahead, Tony. I'm sorry. I get carried away sometimes.
Well, I want to make sure that we're doing a good show, that we're educating people. That I don't want to bully anybody with my opinion simply because I'm a minister and a lawyer. You have your right, a First Amendment right, to express your whatever you want to believe. That's what's great about a democracy. The problem is that sometimes the democracy can become a bully, and that's why our Bill of Rights was established from the very beginning to ensure that do not have a tyranny of the majority by protecting the rights of the minority. That is how our Constitution works. That's how it's supposed to be interpreted. It is tricky. It is not easy. It is difficult. It's complex, but it is a good system, and it's got 250 years now that are celebrating our country's anniversary. And our Constitution was written 1787. So we have a long history with this Constitution and its interpretations and the way we'll have our problems. We will have our problems. You will get pissed off. You may get pissed off at me because I'm not taking a position one way or another. I'm telling you what the law is, whether you like it or not. That's the way it is. Okay, that's the way our system works. And it could work 5-4 for you, it could work 5-4 against you, and that's what I want to explore. And I'm hoping that we do a good job with that, Steve. So,
Well, Tony, I think you are doing a heck of a job. We've been at this for a while. This concept was not born yesterday.
right,
Raw Talk, Divine Justice, and Puerto Rico.
Mark.
Yes, this was not. Oh well, let's do this. No, we've been working on this individually for a very, very long time. And actually, what was it? 2 years ago,
right,
I called you and say, hey Tony, let's do this. Let's go live. And you're like, nah, I'm not ready for that. I'm retired. But you were working in Divine Justice, and you were working, and your concept and the mood, chord, and all that stuff, and I was over here working on Raw. So when it took a year and a half, and then I came back to you. Hey Tony, no, actually you called me.
right,
Hey Steve,
right.
I'm ready now. But
Right.
a year and a half had gone by.
Yeah.
I had gone through cancer, and you were like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, man." But the beauty of this is what we want to do and what is in our heart, which is basically to bring the information, to be able to bring you the facts.
Right.
The facts are what we are going to bring. Opinions, are opinions. The facts are what we want to bring. And when it comes to these subjects, like it is divine justice, how does divine works with the civil justice? And what does the law of God says, and what does the law of man says? And how we interpret and see, okay, the outcome or whatever the circumstance and case might be.
All right.
But you have a different belief than I do when it comes to religion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you believe that all ways go, all. You used the word.
All paths.
All paths.
Right.
All paths lead to God.
Right.
I believe there's only one path that leads to God, and it's through Jesus Christ. You know, there's. You know, I also believe that religion was created by man to capitalize. Jesus didn't preach religion. He criticized the establishment. Why? Because they were always looking for the money. It was all about the money. Oh, and the rules. You know, the people that needed the attention, you know.
Jesus was the first rebel. First rebel. He truly was a rebel. He really went there to make changes. You know?
And I'm glad. And I'm glad because in the Bible, you know, basic instruction before leaving Earth, which is the handbook for humans, for us to know the history of God and what God planned for us, you know, and what his plan was before he created man out of the dust, and then he created woman out of his rib so she can walk by his side, and then the serpent came in the apple and whole hell break loose, you know.
Right.
And then you have, if you look at religion, all religions come from the Bible. The Torah.
Mm-hmm.
First books, 5 books of Moses.
You can
Stops
actually
right.
you can actually go to even before and take, for example, the Great Flood was in the Sumerian tablets 5,000 years ago, maybe before the writing of the Torah.
Oh yeah.
You know?
I mean, Persia is the oldest civilization. Okay, and people been around. You know, when God brought the wind, they were already there. You know.
Well, listen, we got 3 minutes. Well, let's wrap it up because I want to wrap it up at the 15.
Oh, that's right. That's
Okay?
right. That's right.
And,
Sorry.
I got some other things we need to do today, but I want to thank you, Steve. I think we had a great show, and I believe it was easy enough for everyone else to understand where we're going. Hopefully, it will attract some attention, and we could teach a lot of people.
And next time we'll be live, and like I said, we apologize. We apologize. We're still learning the system. Conducting a show, doing production, editing, and so forth all at once is not easy. That's why you got production. That's why you got editors. That's why you have, you know, lighting. Right. That's why you have this. We doing everything over here. But it's okay. It's okay. We do it with one mission, and it's to bring the information correctly to the people, because we are living different times, my friend. And I think this will help us understand what we are going through now in our society.
Yep. And if you want to leave a message on YouTube and or Facebook, please do so. I want to thank you all, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. God bless.